This week on Full Circle Florida, the shutdown and the travel nightmare. The FAA now cutting flights at 40 major airports across America. Families stuck in limbo less than 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Is this the gut punch that finally drags Congress back to work, to the table to make a deal and end the shutdown chaos? We've lined up our political experts to sift through the fallout and map out what is next. Tuesday's elections, New York, New Jersey, Virginia going blue, decisively Democratic sweeps. Are these seismic signals of backlash against President Trump or merely more politicians running on cheap promises? What does it mean for the midterms? A blue surge or a red alarm from MAGA? And we are getting real about why health insurance premiums are skyrocketing. And spoiler here, it is messier than just pinning it all on the insurance companies. All right, first up here, Presley Baker, host of the Baker Take podcast. Okay, Presley, now they are messing with our flights on a weekend, no less, 3 weeks out from Thanksgiving. Do you think this will be the straw that finally breaks the back of lawmakers, gets them to the table to open up the government and make a deal?
You know, I think it's going to be a really significant factor because if there are people that aren't going to be able to get home to their families for Thanksgiving and the holidays coming up, and we see politicians and members of Congress home with their families for Thanksgiving, that's going to be a really big problem for their popularity in their district and in general for Congress members up for re-election in the coming year. So if there's one thing Congress members want, it's popularity. So it's definitely going to be a big factor.
Yeah, and they want to fly home too. What does the mandate in New York City, what do you think it means for the rest of America? Does this have tangible consequences that will spill beyond Broadway and echo throughout the country? This is a city where people have been complaining about the cost of living since Manhattan was called New Amsterdam, and now there's murmurs that Seattle could go socialist next. Or is this just isolated to New York City?
You know, I think New York City is an animal of its own. It's unlike any place to live, to visit, and it's expensive to live in New York, like you just said. It's like, I think the average rent price is now between $3,600 and $4,500 a month, which is insane. And if there's one thing we've learned from Trump's election last year, it's that people vote with their pocketbook when they can't afford certain things like rent and groceries. And I think that that's one of the major effects that you're seeing in New York City right now that led to Mamdani being elected. But I'm not sure if it's going to show a huge trend towards democratic socialism or other extreme versions of progressivism like that across the country, because New York, like I said, New York is unique. Yeah. And there's a reason it leads on trends in fashion and culture and in politics. But I think we'll see whether or not people like his policies or whether he can even implement them.
Yeah, he's got to deliver at this point. Running is the easy part. Did the value of the Trump endorsement take a hit this week, or is the Don still the godfather of the GOP?
You know, I kind of think that was a last-ditch effort to grab anyone that might be voting for Curtis Sliwa and turn them to vote for Cuomo instead. But I truly think that Trump is still, like you said, the Don, the godfather of the Republican Party. If anything, he should have endorsed Zohran Mamdani and seen how the people that were going to vote for Zohran were conflicted by that endorsement and maybe repeal some votes off of him. But
I mean, there are a lot of comparisons between him and Zohran in the sense that they're both populist politicians. Do the Democrats have a face? Are they still searching for an identity? It seems like they found their message. They're going to go after the wallet this time, focus on that instead of the woke stuff. But who is their leader?
Well, you know, I think both parties go after the wallet. I think that's a big reason why Donald Trump won last year, because the Democrats' really only messaging was, we hate Donald Trump, don't vote for Donald Trump. They didn't really have a major platform other than that. And Trump focused on what Americans cared about at the time. But I think what we're truly seeing out of this specific election is that the Democrats had no dynamic leader, and they still lack a dynamic leader that has a message that the entire party can get behind. Zohran Mamdani is a great example of why charismatic, good-looking young people do well in politics, and especially in a progressive environment like New York City. But I think the Democrats really need to decide, once Trump isn't on the ballot, what they're going to be focused and rallying and centered around and who that's going to be, because that's been a problem for them the last 3 election cycles.
Well, Mamdani's 34 years old, and something that really a lot of people are not talking about is perhaps this is a reset to go back to, I'm sorry, but a younger crowd. I mean, we've got 2 80-year-old presidents back to back. at this point. Finally, is this week, with everything that's happened, a chance for both parties to reset and say, okay, we have both been active participants in inflicting real pain on the American people of late. We're both complicit in this government shutdown. We're both using everyday Americans as political pawns in this ongoing game of chicken. And this week, voters in at least 3 states did send a pretty clear message: do your job and stop getting in the way of ours. And I guess the question is, Presley, is Washington going to listen? I mean, I think accountability is always just one election away. And if I'm an incumbent in Congress right now, Democrat or Republican, I'd be pretty worried about my future in politics, because there's going to be a lot of folks who are just going to check the opposite box on the ballot, even if it's against their own party, and basically say, throw them all out.
Yeah, I think the incumbency advantage is really strong no matter what. But you're right. When people see that politicians aren't working for them anymore, they're very quick to change their mind about them. And I think that the longer this goes on, the less people are going to like their own congressman. And their favorability of Congress is never high. But in times like this, where it's the longest government shutdown in history and people are losing benefits that prevent them from being able to eat regularly, it's going to be a big issue. And it's going forward, it's going to be a big problem for incumbents.
Presley Baker with the Baker Take podcast. Thank you for your insight.
Thanks for having me.
Next, the real culprits behind the health insurance spike hitting your paycheck. Has the premium pain hit you yet? This week, open enrollment began, and so did the game of risk for millions of Americans. Here's my conversation with economist Benga Aljalori on what exactly is driving up the cost of health care. I'm so glad you're here with us this week. Everyone says that hospitals and doctor groups are getting bigger and stronger. I'm just curious, what chunk of your premium today goes to places like that basically run their local market? I see so many glitzy TV ads for hospitals these days, pharmaceutical companies, with drugs that names I can't pronounce for conditions I've never heard of. They're on constantly in primetime television. Is that where the money's going? Is that why the hospital charges you $100 for a Tylenol? We've got urgent care centers in the Tampa Bay area that seem like Starbucks now. They're on every corner. When people see that, they start to question, is this why I'm paying so much for health insurance?
That's a great question. And I think the one thing to realize is that this is such an intricate system, and it's hard to disentangle what the drivers of cost are. And so you think about, there's the manufacturers, there's the insurers, there are pharmacy benefit managers, there's a pharmacy itself, along with the hospital and the doctors. And so it's hard to disentangle those things. And I think one of the things that we need to think about, this is more of like a long-term thing, is introducing transparency to the whole system, so you know where the money goes, where it's coming from, where you're talking about a brand name drug versus generic drug versus what the pharmacy needs versus what the manufacturer needs. That's the kind of thing you have to think about.
And we certainly have made advancements in medication. I mean, you look at this, how much of this is pure profit, if you want to look at it cynically, versus people having the availability to get more scans earlier for things like cancer, more medication for almost anything. That healthcare today in 2025, you could argue, is much more layered, much more thorough and advanced than, say, 1985, but you are paying a lot more for it.
That is correct. So, and that's the other thing, is we are healthier, we have more advances, there are more diseases that we're able to pick up earlier. We think about, doing colonoscopy scans at age 40 and things like that. And we have, if you find it, there are procedures you can do and things you could take to be able to alleviate it. You think about people, life expectancy, where people were living to 60, 70, now people are living longer. So that's part of it, is like, to be able to get those advancements, we have to put in the investment and the research and development to be able to get that.
But at what point does this system break? With the average family's premiums hit, say, 20% of their take-home pay, where's the wall? I mean, I mentioned we did a story, a lady we interviewed here on our nightly newscast, that her health insurance went from $200, $300 a month to now $1,000. Completely not possible for her. And people are faced with the prospect of not having health insurance and just hoping that nothing bad happens to them.
Exactly. And that's the thing about what's happening right now with the Affordable Care Act, the tax credits. There were tax credits that were, didn't make it cheaper, but did mitigate some of the higher costs. And now that the Congress has let that expire, that's going to make it really tough for people. And we have to put this in a broader context that, you're looking at what's happening with the SNAP program and those benefits going away. You look at higher grocery prices, individuals are getting hit at all sides. And so you have to kind of advocate to your representative that, you want to be able to mitigate your cost.
Basic needs and affordability, perhaps the number one topic in the coming year of 2026. I know it certainly played a big role this week in the elections that we saw across the country. Binga Ajilore, Chief Economist, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Thank you so much for your insights, sir. Really appreciate it. Next, Dr. Susan McManus is back to unpack the wild week, the shutdown chaos, the election shocks, and why it's a blaring wake-up call for both parties. Welcome back in here to Full Circle, Florida. And look who's back, Dr. Susan McManus, our voice of reason. And we need you this week because there's a lot that happened. Let's take a step back and get the 30,000-foot view here on the week that was with the election results. What are the lessons we should be taking away from this and gleaming for 2026? It seems like this is a wake-up call and a warning for Republicans. At the same time, if Democrats think that somehow, this means they're going to sweep the midterms, the reality check is these were blue-leaning Democratic states, New Jersey, Virginia, New York, not really representative in the entire country. But President Trump and those who were hoping to succeed him should probably pay attention to the message that was left behind here. This felt like a mini midterm.
Well, it did, and of course the press built it up to almost like the Super Bowl of politics, and it is football season after all. But with some of the things that we know, and already the major newspapers, New York Times on one side and Wall Street Journal on the other, are both cautioning euphoria from either party and both parties and saying you better not stop with this.
Right.
It's natural Democrats are on top of the world. They needed this kind of shot in the arm. It's also natural that Republicans are going to do a very, very deep dive into every kind of ad they ran, any kind of outreach, mailer, personal appearance. Messaging is extremely important. And I'll add one thing to it. Republicans and Democrats alike are attentive that they better choose some new faces for high places because this generational thing that we saw front and center is not going to be over.
Yeah, the young voter showed up this time.
Yes.
And both parties now have a year to adjust their message before 26. Another part of the fallout here, California passed Proposition 50, which allows the state to redraw congressional maps, squeeze out 5 more districts that will heavily favor Democrats when it comes to Congress. And it was obviously a response to Texas doing the same thing there in favor of their Republican districts. What do you make of this re-engineering of these congressional maps as essentially a political weapon? I know this has been done before, but this seems to be in direct response to one person, President Trump.
Oh, absolutely. And it started with Republicans saying, we're going to do it. And the president even speaking to some of the governors in those states. Followed very quickly, though, by California, where you have the governor who's interested in being the Democratic nominee in 2028.
Yeah.
But I think it's very disturbing in some ways to people who are already suspicious that there's some sort of secret game behind the scenes of, drawing districts to get people in it that they want. But there's one caveat. There's still the U.S. Supreme Court ruling on Voting Rights Act that could affect a lot of this.
Diving into the New York results, they should rephrase the Raging Cajun James Carville's famous phrase, it's the economy stupid, and call it it's affordability stupid. That was essentially Mandani's message. It was a blowout in a field that was split 3 ways. That's hard to do. But it's one thing to campaign, make a bunch of promises for a bunch of free stuff. It's another thing to deliver results. So is this the brand that Democrats are going to gravitate to in 26 and 28? And just like MAGA did with voters in the middle, force them essentially to choose? It's base versus base. The Democrats still have to figure out who they are. What is their model?
Well, the thing of it is the 2026 election cycle is about state and local politics. Yes, you have congressional races, but in many states, almost all, they elect governors, they elect their congress members, they elect state legislators and cabinet members and so on. So your message and who you're aiming it at is going to be different from one district to another, one state to another. And that's the challenge of a midterm general election.
Shifting gears to healthcare, open enrollment kicked off this week. Millions of Americans, premiums spiking again. We talked about it earlier in the show, up an average of 7 to 10%. Do politicians from either party, I know this is all tied to the government shutdown, does anyone have an answer to this? Or have we come to a point where the idea of affordable health care in this country is just pie in the sky? And no one really knows what to do.
The irony is exactly as you pointed to. Both parties in Congress and the president all understand that the Affordable Health Care Act is not perfect and it needs adjusting. That's what's holding up the closing of the shutdown right now, is the bargaining to go on. Both parties know it has to be fixed, that it's not sustainable.
Right, and they could say, let's work the details of that out, without causing all of this pain for all these people that are now, worried about getting food on the table. Right. President Trump, he's touting foreign policy victories, and rightly so, stabilizing the Middle East, dialing back tensions with China. We'll see how that holds. But, it comes at a time where, the shutdown has caused a lot of pain for people. It's hammered federal workers. It's exposed cracks on the home front. Is it easier for a president to rack up international headlines when the home front governance is faltering? And shouldn't he prioritize America first? I mean, that's what he ran on. And these are the people that are being hurt by this. A lot of them are Trump voters. So doesn't he run the danger here of, look, how are we winning? How is America better again?
But you still have to understand that there for a while we were worried about international security, homeland security, so to speak, and going abroad and coming up with a peace deal. A lot of people were thinking, oh, gee, we really need that. But we know an old lesson. When people are hurting in their pocketbook, that's all that matters. That's
right.
How Trump won in 2024.
One of my favorite jokes is they find a cure for cancer and you're in line to get the vaccine to get yourself cured for cancer, and you get up there and you say, that's great, but I could really just use a sandwich. I mean, basic needs first, and that's what a lot of people are dealing with right now. Trump voters expected a better deal on everyday costs. They're feeling let down, rising expenses. Both parties have stalled on these real solutions. Are we reaching a tipping point where the frustration boils over into voter apathy? If the voter doesn't trust either party to get things done, what's the point of voting? I mean, or should I vote for the people that are keeping the volunteers that are keeping the food pantries open, because at least they're looking out for real people? I mean, where do you go?
The bottom line is the election we just saw, the Democrats turned out because their issue was being articulated clearly and it was very real. So obviously the tables can turn by the next election. But here's the dilemma we're in right now. And it's an old saying and it's just becoming much more dramatized. Mm-hmm. People want something that's free, they want solutions that are perfect, and they want them now. How can either party say definitively facing the public, we've got all these answers and we can do it now? And that's the dilemma. And all we have is what's going to happen is the polarization is going to continue to be there. And the idea that one party is just overwhelmed by this election and people aren't going to show up for the next, that's pie in the sky.
Vote, participate, but also take a hard look at yourself, look in the mirror and see what you can do as well. Dr. Susan McManus, hang with us. We got final thoughts on the week that was and the week ahead. Welcome back to Full Circle Florida and our final thoughts on the week that was and the week ahead. What are you left with this week?
What an election. It got a lot of people's attention. Now the work has to start on the part of both parties going forward.
What are you paying attention to next week?
I'm paying a lot of attention to what kind of things that Florida's Republicans and Democrats do ahead of this session that's just coming up.
Property taxes is going to be top of the agenda.
And by the way, property tax was the #1 issue for New Jersey voters.
That's right. And the thing starts early this year, January. We're off and running right after Christmas. Dr. Susan McManus, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for watching us here in Full Circle Florida. We hope you'll join us again next week, and make sure to add our free 24/7 streaming news channel, Tampa Bay 28+. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you.